Hi, peeps. You're listening to She's My Cherry Pie, the baking podcast from the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. I'm your host, Jessie Sheehan. I'm a baker, recipe developer, and author of 4 baking books, including Salty, Cheesy, Herby, Crispy, Snackable Bakes. On each episode, I hang out with the sweetest bakers around and take a deep dive into their signature bakes. Today's guest is a special friend of mine, Renato Poliafito. Renato is the owner of Ciao, Gloria, a bakery and café in Prospect Heights, Brooklyn, and Pasta Night, a casual pasta restaurant across the street from the bakery. And fun fact, Nato gave me my first bakery job, and he and his team basically taught me everything I know. Renato is also a 2-time James Beard Award nominee and the co-author of several cookbooks. His latest book, a love letter to Italy as it were, is Dolci, American Baking with an Italian Accent, and it is his first as a solo author. Renato and I talk about his love affair with Italy, from his childhood trips there, spent missing his home in Queens, New York, to the Italian-inspired recipes he developed for the books he co-wrote, to Ciao, Gloria, a cafe steeped in his Italian-American upbringing. Then we talk about his Spumoni loaf, a cake inspired by the traditional Southern Italian gelato dessert Spumoni, as well as Italian-American rainbow cookies. I loved chatting with Renato, so stay tuned for our convo. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.com. Cherry Bomb's newest issue, The Power Issue, is out now. We have 4 different covers for this issue, and you won't believe our cover stars. Activist and author Gloria Steinem, Chef Mashama Bailey of The Gray in Savannah, Chef restaurateurs Jody Williams and Rita Sodi behind Via Carota and More in New York City, and chef and culinary creative Sophia Rowe. If you're a subscriber to Cherry Bomb Magazine, you'll receive your issue very soon. If you're not a subscriber yet, head to cherrybomb.com and sign up today to receive this issue, or stop by your local culinary shop or bookstore to pick up a copy. Let's chat with today's guest. Nato! So excited to have you on She's My Cherry Pie and to talk Spumoni loaf cake with you and so much more.
Yay, I'm very excited.
So your new book, Dolci, American Baking with an Italian Accent, is truly a love letter to Italy. But your first impressions of Italy as a little boy were not the most enthusiastic. Can you tell us about those feelings?
Oh, yeah, I'd be happy to. My parents did this thing when I was growing up where every few years we would up and go to Italy and Sicily, actually, because that's where my parents were from, and they were from this small town, under the guise of it being a summer vacation. So school would end, they'd be like, we're going to Sicily. And I'm like, that's great. They're like, pack your bags, whatever. We're going for a few weeks. And I thought that was great because I had family in Sicily. The food was good. It was just a completely different culture. It was a fun experience. But what my parents would do is extend the stay for months on end into the new school year, with the idea of oh, maybe we'll live here now. It was very difficult for me because I would be an American kid in a very small Italian town and almost like a point of interest to people. And they would enroll me in school, and my Italian wasn't fantastic, and it was hard making friends, and the curriculum was so different than my curriculum in America. And then also it was the 80s, so the world wasn't as connected as it is today. I would only write letters to friends and receive letters on occasion, and we didn't even have a telephone in the town we were in. So it was just very difficult. And you're coming from New York as a kid where you have access to everything, and you have your toys, you have your TV shows, you have your friends, to a place where you had none of that. So it was always very trying. And they did that 3 times throughout my childhood. Because of that, I was just like, oh, I'm over Italy. I can't. And that was my only exposure to it. So, of course, it was somewhat negative.
You and Italy had an early breakup or a rocky start.
Yeah.
So I get it that your feelings a little ambivalent, particularly because these stays got extended. But were there yummy baked treats or things that you were eating that could compete with the Hostess cupcakes or the whatever was happening back in the United States? And if so, can you tell us about those treats?
Yes, there were, and they were completely different. I mean, I discovered Nutella in 1979. Because I would go to Sicily and my aunt would, as it looks like on the jar, there's a piece of bread with Nutella spread on it. It's how it was eaten, and it was eaten at any point during the day. So I thought Nutella was the bee's knees. That was one of the first things. And then that was the joy. I would, eat gelato and ice creams and little torts and arancini and all the classic Italian street food. So to me, that was really exciting. And also I had 4 aunts that I would just bop around and I would just eat at their houses like on any given day. And I'd have these amazing meals.
Were they your mom's sisters or your dad's sisters?
Yeah, my mom was one of 5 sisters.
Wow.
Yeah, and they all lived within like 3 blocks of each other. I love it.
And when you would go to these different aunts' homes, would they be baking treats for you as well as feeding you like delicious pasta?
I would say my aunts were more on the savory side, like pasta alla norma and cutlets. I mean, those were like super typical Italian, Sicilian food. One aunt would bake every now and again and do like a ciambella, which was like, a ring cake. But they would keep it pretty simple. Treats and desserts were meant to kind of be had outside. So we would go to the gelateria. We would go to the bar and have like little desserts and little things you would bring to other people's homes type of things. Also, in the morning, I remember having these things called colussi, which are these cookies that you just throw in milk. It was kind of like a cereal, but it was just like cookies put in milk and like warm milk. And you would eat these cookies.
Like with a spoon?
Yeah, kind of like you could break them apart and just eat them because they would just kind of fall apart in this like warm milk. They were just like a simple, almost a frolla cookie, like a short kind of quick pastry. It was delicious. Absolutely delicious.
Love. Now, I know your mom, maybe like her sisters, was more of a savory cook than a baker. But when she did bake, or if she baked when you were little, were you there? Like, did you have an early kind of love of making sweet things? I mean, I know you had an early love of eating them. Hello, Nutella, as did I. But did you also like to make them with her?
Yes. I mean, I was always in the kitchen. I was your mama's boy. So yeah, I would spend a lot of time in the kitchen with my mom. I was like my mom's assistant. We would clean the house together. I would run errands for her. And I would spend time in the kitchen and she would cook around me. I was never allowed to like do anything, because I was like a son. So it's like I shouldn't be cutting or prepping or anything, but I could watch and taste. And that's what I did growing up. My mom, in her rotation, she had like 2 or 3 pastries or 2 or 3 desserts that she would make. Olive oil cake, cookies. What was the other thing? I mean, she would make these torts every now and again, like a citrus tort or something. Very kind of straightforward, very basic things. But that introduced my love of pastry and dessert.
And also, I think you were a big fan of like a cookie tray. Can you describe cookie trays to us? I know there might be like tricolore and butter cookies and mini versions of pastiera. How's my pronunciation there?
Yeah, you could do like mini versions of pastiera. Yeah,
Tell me about all of that.
I mean, it's just such a classic Italian-American thing. And even like it bleeds into Jewish culture as well. The rainbow cookie, the mini black and whites. In America, it's like you bring a cookie tray to something and it's like filled with butter cookies, everything you just mentioned. But in Italy, that culture is there as well. But you go to the pastry shop, like let's say on a Sunday morning, you pick from a selection, they create a tray for you, they wrap it in that paper with the ribbon, and then you either bring it to someone's house or that's the dessert you have after dinner on a Sunday.
Oh my God. I just love this whole cookie tray notion, right? Cookies on trays.
I mean, who doesn't want to like show up? I'd rather show up with like a tray of cookies than a bottle of wine.
100%. Also, I would rather receive a tray of cookies than a bottle. I'm like, wine, I have that, but please bring me cookies.
I have like 400 bottles of wine, but I'm just like, someone please bring me a cookie tray.
So even though your mom wasn't letting you bake when you were little, you did end up opening a bakery called Baked in Red Hook, Brooklyn in 2005. And I met you there in 2006, my first baking job, making you my first baking boss. Tell us about Baked's vibe and like the kind of baked goods that we made there and all of that.
Yeah, well, I mean, Baked is still around today. It was a classic American bakery, but with a twist. So we would find like these classic American desserts. We would update them. We would tweak them. Or sometimes we would just kind of like clean them up a little. Think 3-layer cakes, brownies, cookies, pies, bars, tarts, that sort of thing.
Rice Krispie treats, whoopie pies.
Treats. Yeah, all of that. And that really introduced me to that love of dessert and also the historical context of dessert. I'm always fascinated. Where do things come from? Why are things the way they are? And applying that to food is always fascinating. yeah, because of that, we wrote 4 cookbooks and did a lot of research. But baked was like a wonderful experience in the sense that it really changed my trajectory, changed my path. I'm really grateful for that. It was a great cafe. It was like something that was a great mix of classic American bakery and coffee shop, which I think was like a thing that wasn't so common at the time, 2005. And then we tried to, at that time, a lot of bakeries were about the cupcake. A lot of bakeries were trying to look like your grandmother's kitchen type of thing, like that Magnolia moment. Matt and I were 2 guys, and we had a design aesthetic, and we had an approach, and we're like, we don't want to look like that. We don't want it. We want it to be modern and slightly chic and of the moment. So we went with this kind of lodge approach. That's where the antlers come from, the deer and all that. And I think it surprised people. You would walk in and it wouldn't feel like a bakery per se, but, we would have everything a bakery would have.
We'll be right back. Peeps, did you know that we have a free She's My Cherry Pie newsletter that coincides with each new episode? It comes out every Saturday morning and shares insights about the guest, their recipe, and other fun tidbits and baking news, like our cake of the week. To sign up, head to cherrybomb.substack.com or click the link in our show notes. Have you tuned in to Radio Cherry Bomb? It's the flagship podcast from Cherry Bomb, hosted by founder Carrie Diamond. Every Monday, Carrie sits down with the most fascinating folks in food, drink, and hospitality, from icons to rising stars. Don't miss her conversations with Ina Garten, Alice Waters, Padma Lakshmi, the Bears, Liza Colon-Zayas, and so many more. Listen to Radio Cherry Bomb on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. And be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Now back to our guest. While running Baked, you co-authored several cookbooks, and because I tested and developed recipes for them, I have firsthand knowledge of the fact that you were always contributing Italian-inspired baked goods to the Baked books, despite the fact that Baked had more of like this American feeling happening. So I think it's fair to say that you kind of maybe always knew you would write an Italian-American baking book?
Well, I feel like it's just so ingrained in me, and it was how I was raised. As the son of immigrants, I always think that America is an amalgam of different cultures. Everything that is American or uniquely American comes from somewhere else, comes from someone who is from someplace else, or at least maybe a few generations back from someplace else. For me, it seemed logical where I was like, oh, okay, how do I Americanify, or how do I kind of add a little Italian spin to this American dessert? That was always fascinating to me. And I did want to get my stamp on the books to show that it's like, yeah, I did contribute to these as well,
Before the Italian-American baking book came, the Italian-American cafe came, which is Ciao, Gloria, which is one of my all-time faves.
Yay.
Can you tell us about the vibe of, we kind of discussed what Baked was like. Tell us about what Ciao is like and how they're similar and different.
Yeah, well, I mean, Ciao, after I left Baked in 2017, I took a couple of years off and tried to figure out what my next steps should be. I did love having a business, but I was like, okay, if I reapproach this, it has to be on my own terms and it has to be my own place. I felt that I always got tripped up with having partners and investors and people making decisions. It was something I solely wanted to do on my own, but also I had prerequisites. It had to be a new space, it had to be affordable, and I had to really put my stamp on it. I didn't want it to be just like Baked. I was like, okay, well, what if I start leaning into this Italian thing and really kind of make this bright, sunny, happy feeling coffee shop cafe that also happens to sell really great savory food and really great baked goods. And the baked goods are American, Italian, and a little in between. And that's how Ciao kind of came about. It was, for me, it just seems like a perfect representation of who I am and who I've been. And I'm letting the world see. It's like, oh, this is what I'm about. It's a wonderful thing. We're going on our 5th year. It is wonderful. It's a wonderful experience.
Do you think it's fair to say that your dessert style is very much like a mix of Baked and a mix of Ciao? Or do you think Ciao incorporates that kind of Americana vibe already, so it's just what we're seeing in the bakery today?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I have experience with Baked, and Baked is where I learned everything. So, of course, I'm coming into Ciao with that knowledge. So the things I create, things that, we develop there will have echoes of Baked because Baked was what I was as well. What I want to do is, for example, the one thing I did bring from Baked was the chocolate biscotti, which I absolutely loved. I was like, this is the recipe that we need to carry on because I just think it was so good. And biscotti fits perfectly, But yeah, I feel like it is a happy marriage of those two. You worked at Bake, so you know like how the development process goes. It's a conversation, the bakers in the kitchen where they would come up with ideas or concepts and you would kind of hash it out. You would taste it and say, okay, why don't we do this? It's always collaborative. And that's what I like about running a business is that it's not just me saying, hey, we're doing this, case closed. It is, hey guys, what do you think of this? Do any of you have any ideas? Let's make something special together. And that's the way I've approached it for the last 5 years, and it seems to work.
At Baked, we always sold Rice Krispie treats, like
Yeah.
these massive ones that were just heaven. And I know in Dolci, in your new book, you have this like tiramisu Rice Krispie treat. Do you always have a Rice Krispie treat on the Ciao menu?
It comes and goes. The Rice Krispie treat is on the menu now because of the book.
Yep.
Probably in the fall, we'll probably swap it out because fall is so abundant and there are so many different flavors I want to feature.
Can you tell us some of the other things in the case at Ciao that are also in the book?
The crostata della nonna, the amaretti, the almond plum tort, the ricotta polenta tort, any of our cakes, cinnamon rolls, the scones.
These are all in the book?
Yeah.
Wow.
The biscotti.
Yeah.
The carrot cake. You should approach, or at least I approach every book as if it's my last, because you never know.
No.
So I really wanted to say, okay, let me just put this all out there. Yeah. Obviously the recipes in the book aren't like 100% exactly like the ones in the cafe, but they're close and they're delicious. And I think people who come to Ciao will really, enjoy it.
I love that. I love that you get to like write a book and then promote it at work every single day.
Yeah. Well, I call the book the best business card you could ever have.
100%.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk a little bit more about Dolci before we dive into the Spumoni loaf cake recipe. So this book is your fifth, but I love this. You say it's your first solo album. And it's described as a joyous, and I might add gorgeous, celebration of Italian, American, and Italian-American tastes and traditions.
Yep.
And I think you've sort of unpacked that for us. But was that conscious while you were writing it? Like, okay, this is the American, this is the Italian, here I am merging them. Or did it just flow out of you because you're all those things?
It was a little bit of both. I mean, you know this, when you're putting together a cookbook, I think the best approach, and we've gone through this, is start with the table of contents and see how all the recipes work with each other. What does this book look like? Are you covering your breakfast items? Are you covering your bars? Do you have like a chocolate-based, a caramel-based, a cinnamon-based? It's just like you're looking at all of those things. So what I want to do is have something for everyone. And that's how I approached this book. I didn't quite say, okay, this is strictly Italian, this is strictly American with an Italian twist. But I looked at it as a whole because everything in the book would have some Italian component to it. There are basically, maybe like 2 or 3 recipes in there that are just not Italian at all, but we sell them at Ciao. I was like, okay, well, it should be in the book.
I'm so curious because in the front matter of cookbooks, you're often required to do like a favorite ingredients, favorite baking tools. Your editor sort of demands that.
Yep.
And I am very impressed that you do not have an ingredient and tools section. And I would like to know how you finagled that.
It was a conversation I had with Casey Alsace, who you know. Casey refers to himself as a book doula. He helps everyone, I think, that I know, birth a book. He kind of keeps you in line, makes sure you hit your deadlines and all that. So he's fantastic, and he helped me a ton with the book, which I needed because running Ciao and writing a book was something I don't know I think I'll ever do again. But it was a conversation that we had right from the start. He's like, you know what? I don't think this book really needs all of that nonsense. Not that it's nonsense, but it's like every cookbook. Like we wrote it 4 times for the baked books, and it's like the tools you'll need, the ingredients. I wanted it to be approachable, but I wanted it to be a smart book. I wanted it to be, you're probably baking if you pick this up. You've been in a kitchen. We just went through a pandemic. Sourdough. The basics. If there is a recipe that needs something specific, the recipe will mention it. You know where to get your flour. we thought that the most important thing that should be in the front matter of the book was an essay on buying a scale and really approaching baking the way it should be approached, where it's a fact of weights and measures, where, to be a good baker, you should measure in grams. It shouldn't be cups. It shouldn't be that sort of thing. We, of course, added cups and teaspoons and all that, but it's secondary. So when you read a recipe, it's like 400 grams of flour, 250 grams of sugar. And that was the most important part. If you want to be a good baker, buy a scale, measure out your ingredients, and your success rate, I think, will skyrocket.
You first, I think, described it this way to me like years ago before the book came into being. But this idea that it's almost a coffee table book because it's so beautiful. It's full of all these incredible photos of Italy. It's like that book. So it seems almost silly to be like, and then buy some Nutella and some sugar and some flour. You also tell us early on in the book, which I love, that it does not require special equipment.
Mm-hmm.
But can you walk us through some of the ingredients that you think would make sense for us to have before we kind of jump into the book?
Yeah, of course. Well, I want to mention that Kevin Miyazaki, who was the photographer of the book, did all the studio shots and the location shots. He's super talented, and he was a dream to work with. And that's why the book just looks the way it does. He just did such a great job with it. I would say, like, in terms of ingredients, I noted, and one of the most difficult things about writing this book was Italians tend to use the same ingredients across the board for every dessert. So I was like, how do I add variety here? Because if you go to Italy and you look at pastry, it's, you have your frolla dough, and then your fillings are usually apricot, pistachio, chocolate, pastry cream, vanilla pastry cream.
Tell us what frolla dough is in case.
Frolla is just like a quick pastry dough. It's like what Italians use, like tart dough.
Mm-hmm.
They use it for almost everything. They can make cookies with it. They can make tarts with it, whatever. And it's really good. It's sweet. It's a great dough. And it's really friendly. Looking at all the fillings, they tend to love pistachios, almonds, hazelnuts, and ricotta, and then citrus. So every recipe, or at least I'd say 80% of Italian desserts, are some combination of those things,
So interesting.
in different forms.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a bit, in a way, a bit redundant. I mean, Italians, they stick to their guns. These are the ingredients that are from where they are, so they use them. But the variety wasn't quite there. So I really tried to pull back and say, okay, if this recipe is always a ricotta-filled treat, dessert, what if we changed that to pastry cream? What if we did something different here? But yeah, I would say those are the main components that you would need, flour, sugar, butter, and then the nuts, the pistachios, almonds, and hazelnuts, your cocoa, ricotta, and citrus.
All right, so now I can't wait to dive into your Spumoni loaf cake recipe. I chose this recipe or asked you if we could do this recipe because I so associate you with like tricolore cookies, and we will talk about what those are, but for a rainbow cookie. First, will you tell us what is Spumoni?
Spumoni is, and I did a little research on this as well because I was like, where did it come from? It's a Neapolitan-based treat. It's usually an ice cream, and it's 3 layers of a pistachio, cherry, and chocolate, most usually. I did read somewhere, and I kind of find this fascinating, is that when that concept of those 3 flavors made it stateside, I think pistachios or cherries might have been a little less available. So they replaced it with vanilla and strawberry, and they called that Neapolitan. Isn't that amazing?
Yes.
Anyway, so I believe that because I'm like, that makes sense. So Neapolitan and Spumoni are from the same thing. And Spumoni means aerated. So basically it was an aerated cream with these flavors of dried fruits and nuts and eaten frozen. A rainbow cookie is a typically American dessert that was created by an Italian, is what they say. It has multiple names. I call them tricolores because it emulates the Italian flag, and the Italian flag is the tre colori. It's a 7-layer cookie or a rainbow cookie. At Baked, even in the first book, it was always one of my favorite things. So even in the first book, I was doctoring it, and I created a orange, chocolate, and vanilla infused rainbow cookie, which I absolutely loved. And I think Baked probably still sells it to this day. But when I opened Ciao, I started with the Neapolitan flavors. Then I moved to a Spumoni flavor of these little bars. But then I just moved it back to the classic because I always found that the classic always outsold any other flavor. But for the book, I was like, I really love that Spumoni combination. It's so Italian. So I decided to oversize it, turn it into like a loaf cake, and have those 3 classic flavor components, the pistachio, the cherry, and the chocolate, cover it in a chocolate ganache, and there you go.
And layer it with...
Oh, with a raspberry jam.
Yeah.
Yeah, and most of them are, you could do raspberry or apricot.
Are the tricolor cookies, those are almond cake as well?
Yes.
It's just teeny tiny little layers of almond
They're
cake
thin almond
that you would
layers.
like make in a sheet pan?
Yep. You can make it in a sheet pan. Most bakeries would make them that way. A full sheet, all 3 layers. You're dyeing each layer. They're all almond flavored, but my version is adding things to them, additional flavors. So you have an almond base, but maybe with pistachio bits and some pistachio extract in it.
And I also love that they're non-existent in Italy, since as an American, I'm like, oh my God, look at that Italian cookie.
Yeah.
So in short, the recipe pulls from the best of both. It's like built at the scale of a Spumoni with almond, chocolate, cherry, and pistachio cake layers, sandwiched with this raspberry jam and topped with like a shimmery dark chocolate glaze.
Yes.
So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make the cake layers. So we're going to heat the oven to 325, set a rack in the center, and we're going to grease 3 9x5-inch loaf pans with cooking spray, and then line each with a parchment sling, leaving a little bit of overhang. And that sling is so that we have very...
easy lift.
Right, so that we can just lift out the layers. We don't have to worry about inverting the pan. Then in a medium bowl, and I wonder, do you have like a type of bowl or a brand of bowl that you like to use?
I have I have these nesting bowls from an old Martha Stewart that I use all the time. But then I have my glass bowls from Anchor Hocking. And then, if I'm in the cafe, if I'm at Ciao, it's just your classic metal bowls.
So in a medium bowl, we're going to whisk some all-purpose flour. Is there a brand you like, either at home or at the bakery?
King Arthur. King Arthur is always fantastic.
We're going to whisk that all-purpose flour, baking powder, fine sea salt. Why not kosher salt?
Because I find that in a recipe like this one, it integrates a little better than the kosher. For me, kosher, it's almost like flaky sea salt. It's like something you might finish with. But the fine sea salt, I find that it's just the way it spreads into the recipe more.
And is there a certain kind of whisk you like a balloon whisk or a skinnier whisk?
Well, I wish I had a balloon whisk with the one with the little thing inside. Yeah. But I just have a regular whisk at home.
So we're going to sort of whisk those dry ingredients together, set them aside, and then in a stand mixer fitted with our paddle attachment, we're going to beat some almond paste.
Yep.
Can you tell us the brand of almond paste?
It varies. I mean, we get our almond paste through our distributor, and sometimes it's one brand or another. It's a green package. Ideally, if you have the means, there's almond paste that comes directly from Sicily. One very famous one is from a town, Erice, where Maria Grammatica, she makes almond paste and she sells it kind of like in logs. And the last time I was there, I bought like 4 logs and obviously used them all up. But if you have access, I know sometimes maybe like Italy might have them. I know she ships out using that because that is true almond paste. It's the right sweetness. It's actual almonds from Sicily. It's perfect.
And I always wonder with almond paste, can I wrap it up in plastic wrap and keep it?
Yeah.
You could just keep it at room temp in your cabinet.
You can keep it, I think, until it's opened. Then I would probably refrigerate it.
Okay.
But yeah, you can keep it wrapped and reuse it. Have you ever had Sicilian almond milk?
No.
Okay, so it's made with almond paste. So you just slice off a chunk of it, add cold water, shake, 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 shake. And then it's this delicious cold almondy milk sweetened drink.
Gosh.
It's really, really good. And that's what you could use with the excess. Or if you just I don't feel like baking, you can make that almond milk. It's such a treat.
Yeah. So we're going to beat almond paste with some granulated sugar at medium speed until the almond paste is like pea-sized pieces. Then we're going to add some unsalted room temp butter. Beat on medium-high until smooth. And this is for about 5 minutes. Are we also looking for something like fluffy and light in color at this point?
Yes. It'll come together into like a homogeneous texture. It won't be like clumps of this, clumps of that. It'll be smooth.
We have eggs in this recipe and we separate them.
Yes.
And at this point, we're going to add some room temperature egg yolks. We'll do so one at a time. Is the mixer still on medium-high or should we bring it down now that we're adding the yolks?
I would say, medium-high is a little quick for the yolks. I would bring it down.
Okay.
I'm always cautious.
Yeah. You don't want to get splattered in egg.
Yeah.
It's not pretty. So we're going to add our room temp egg yolks, maybe at medium speed, one at a time, stopping to scrape the sides of the bowl as needed. Then we're going to add some room temperature whole milk.
Yep.
And some almond and vanilla extract. So I had a couple of questions. First, is there a brand of vanilla or a brand of almond that you guys like at the bakery or that you like at home?
Nielsen Massey.
Does Nielsen Massey do almond?
I believe so.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Nielsen Massey does a bunch of different flavors. I know they do orange and lemon and da-da-da. So, yeah, they do have an almond one because I have that at home. But if not, there's the one they sell at Whole Foods, the organics one.
Yeah, like Simply
Organic. Yeah.
And I have a question. Are you adding the vanilla to kind of pop that almond flavor? Is there also a vanilla flavor you're looking for here? Like, why both extracts?
I find that tricolores tend to be sweet, on the much sweeter side. And I find that the vanilla adds that note, a more familiar bakery flavor note to this. So that's why I added both of them. The almond to really punch up the almond flavor, but the vanilla to give it that familiar sweetness.
Yeah. I love like an almond extract. I know for some people it tastes fake or it doesn't taste. I think it is delicious.
Yeah. You should always use it.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. Case closed. Exactly. And we're going to mix this together until combined.
Yep.
Then we're going to reduce the mixer speed to low, and we're going to add our dry ingredients that are in our bowl that we already whisked in 2 parts, mixing until each one is combined.
Correct.
And then we're transferring all of this batter out of the stand mixer and into a large bowl.
Yep.
We're going to clean and dry our mixer bowl, return it to the stand mixer with a whisk attachment, and we're going to whisk up or beat up our egg whites on medium speed to like medium stiff peaks, about 4 minutes.
Yep.
And then fold the whites back into the batter about a third at a time.
Yep.
Do you do that thing where like the first third you can kind of be a little more aggressive?
Yep.
And then those second 2/3 more...
A gentle hand.
Right. Why do we do that?
I just feel like because that's the one that's going to get beat the most. And that's the one that'll lose its volume the most. So you don't have to worry about it too much. It's like once you get to the second, or most importantly, the last part. And I also kind of like save a little more for the last part, just because I do want it to have like a little bit of that nice lift, that nice texture. But yeah, that's basically why, because you're doing it 3 times. So after 3 beatings, basically, or 3 foldings, it'll lose.
Yeah. Oh, and I didn't ask, but is there a favorite spatula you like, or either at home or at the bakery?
No, I mean, I use the classic, you know what?
The restaurant supply ones with the white heads. And
With the white heads, I have those at the cafe. But, once I was given and you'll appreciate this, a free Kerrygold rubber spatula.
Aww.
And it's green,
Aww.
and I absolutely love it.
Now that we have folded in our whites, we're going to evenly divide the batter into 3 medium bowls.
Yep.
And in a small bowl, so a 4th bowl, we're going to mix up some cocoa powder and some boiling water together to form a paste. So a couple of questions. First of all, Dutch processed, natural? Which cocoa powder do you prefer?
Dutch processed, yeah.
And we're adding this boiling water. We're blooming the chocolate. Can you tell us a little bit about blooming?
Yeah, blooming is just basically you're releasing the flavor of whatever you're blooming. So, blooming chocolate will take it to that next stage where it is chocolate. You're basically folding that into the mixture, and the paste is something that you're kind of folding into the almond cake. And because it's bloomed, because it's a paste, it becomes more uniform throughout.
We're going to add this chocolate to 1 bowl of our batter, along with some mini chocolate chips, which I love.
Texture.
Do you have a brand of chips, a percentage? And yes, tell us why you add them.
We get our chocolate chips from Chef's Warehouse, and they're vegan, and they're dark, and they're really good, and they're mini. I can't remember the name of it, though.
Yeah.
But they're actually pretty good.
Yeah. As I asked that question about percentage, I feel like I've only ever seen minis in like semi-sweet.
Yes.
I'm sure they probably exist in other percentages, but I've only ever
I would
seen
say this is a high percentage because then there's no milk content because they are vegan.
Yeah.
So they're nice and dark.
Yeah, that's
and
lovely.
they're really chocolatey.
And do they end up kind of melting a little bit in the cake batter? They stay?
They stay. So you have this nice bite. And that's the thing I wanted to incorporate. Spumoni classically has fruit and nuts and things inside of it. So you have that texture along with the frozen quality of it. But here I wanted to add that idea.
And we're going to fold that up. So we have this 1 bowl. Now we have turned our little bowl of almond batter, cake batter, into like a chocolate chip almond cake batter.
Exactly.
Love. To our 2nd bowl of batter, we're going to add pistachio extract and 2 drops of green food gel coloring. And some unsalted, toasted, roughly chopped pistachios. We'll fold that up. Is pistachio extract hard to find?
It's not super hard to find. I mean, we live in a world where you just go on Amazon and you'll find it. I don't think it'll be in your regular supermarket aisle unless you have like a really nice supermarket. But it is something that's relatively easy to find. With pistachio extract, it's interesting because I think most pistachio extracts are based off of almond extract with some slight differences, but mainly it's almond, you know?
Yeah, is there a brand are you guys using a Nielsen Massey pistachio extract?
No, I think this was a Simply Organics one. Because I remember it was like one of those things where it's like, the Nielsen Massey does not have this.
It's funny because I was going to say that. I feel like whenever I am making something that is pistachio flavored, the trick to pop the pistachio flavor is a teeny bit of almond extract. But I love the idea of pistachio extract.
Yeah.
I once worked with I don't know, I developed, I think it was like a pistachio chiffon cake, and so it needed oil, and I found like pistachio oil. So it was like all these different components.
Yeah.
But I still think I used a little bit of
just
almond
like
extract.
a teaspoon or something. Yeah.
Totally.
And that's the thing. It's like this is an almond cake already.
Right.
So this is where the doctoring comes
Yep.
in. You know, it's like if you have the pistachio extract, use that. It will lean. It's just a more almondy taste.
Yep.
And then if you do it organically, you won't get that greenish color.
Yep.
That is so classic in Spumoni and so classic in pistachio desserts. So that's why you have to add the gel.
And tell us about, is there a brand of gel that you guys love?
Is it Americolor?
Yeah.
Americolor.
Yeah. Yeah. And gel is just better than food coloring that's liquid because it is just...
It's more concentrated.
Right. You're not adding liquid to a batter, let's say, that maybe you don't want to add any more liquid to.
Exactly.
And some unsalted, toasted, roughly chopped pistachios, and we're going to fold that all up to combined, and that's our second cake layer. And then in the last bowl of almond cake batter, we're going to add 1 drop of red food gel, some cherry preserves, love, and fold till combined. Brand of cherry preserves?
I usually use Bon Maman.
I love Bon Maman.
Yeah, the cherry, like because you get bits of cherry. It's so cherry forward.
Yeah.
It's great for baking, especially if you're doing a cherry dessert.
I love that. And then we're going to transfer each of these bowls of batter to their own 9 by 5 inch loaf pan, and we're going to spread in an even layer. And I think when I was first reading the recipe, I was picturing 3 big loaf cakes of each of these flavors, but it's actually just like an inch or so of batter in each cake?
The recipe makes 1 cake.
Yeah.
So you're splitting it into
so
3
it's like
different
a third
layers.
of
a third of a cake.
Yeah.
So they're only about an inch tall.
Oh, I love. We spread it in an even layer. We're going to bake the cakes till they're baked through, till they're springy when touched. So no toothpick? Like we're not doing a toothpick test?
Yeah, you could test. They may bake off a little differently just because the bases are doctored.
Yep.
So, the chocolate might take a little longer, or the cherry might take a little longer because it has more liquid.
Yep.
It's that sort of thing. But yeah, you can do a toothpick test. Just make sure with the chocolate you're not going through a piece of chocolate.
Yep.
And then the cherry you're not
And do
going
you
through
like your
cherry.
toothpicks clean or a little bit of moist crumbs?
I like a little bit of moist crumb
Me
where you
too.
pull it off and you create a little
that's
ball.
a little baked trick.
Yes.
Always a moist crumb.
Mhm.
And you have like about 40 to 50 minutes for the baking time?
Yep.
But like you said, the cakes may bake at slightly different times, so check them each individually. And we're going to transfer the pans to a wire rack, let them cool about 20 minutes, and then we'll remove each cake from each pan using that parchment sling.
Yep.
Do we kind of need to use a butter knife to cut at the edges to make sure they don't stick?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the sling will, since it goes over on 4 sides, will come.
Oh, you do a 4-way sling.
Yeah, 4-way sling.
Oh, very fancy.
I know.
Oh, yeah, I only do a 1-way sling, but you do a sling that...
This way and this way. So that way it just pulls right out. There's no complications.
Oh, brilliant.
But then, yeah, you would basically, once these are cooled, you trim them a little. You'll trim the top. If the edges are a little
Make
dark.
them sharp.
Yeah, just sharpen them up.
Yep. So we'll remove each cake from the pan using parchment sling. We'll carefully remove the parchment paper, set them on wire racks to cool about an hour. Now we'll assemble the cake. We will trim the top of the cake with a serrated knife to create level surfaces. We're going to place a big sheet of plastic wrap on the counter. How big?
9 by 5, enough to just wrap it. Most bakers want to wrap things twice.
Yes.
So I would say if it's 9 by 5, 19, 27, 30 inches.
Yep. We're going to place the pistachio layer in the center of the wrap and, like we just discussed, make sure there's enough plastic to cover the entire cake once all the layers are layered on top of each other. We're going to spread raspberry preserves on the top of the pistachio cake in an even layer. And is that Bon Maman again?
Raspberry, yes. I mean, it could be your favorite raspberry jam. I just happen to be a loyalist with Bon Maman. Yeah.
Then we're going to place the cherry layer of cake on top of the raspberry, lining up the sides of the cherry layer and the pistachio layer. Spread some more raspberry preserves on top of the cherry layer. Finally, we're topping with our chocolate layer, lining up our sides.
Yep.
And we're going to wrap the cake really tightly in the plastic rack. Place the cake into a clean loaf pan.
Yes.
Place it in the refrigerator to set at least 4 hours or overnight. So why do we do this?
If you've made cakes before, you want them to set. You want them to be like nice and firm, especially when the next step is pouring a glaze over it. You want it to be nice and cool so the glaze will set quickly. But basically, you're assembling this cake kind of upside down. You know, you're starting with the
pistachio, but you'll then flip it over.
And that'll be the top.
Is it also this idea that, like, by tightly wrapping it and refrigerating it, you're melding all the flavors, you're melding even the shape of the cake
Yes.
will be that perfect shape that we want. So when we slice, it's not like we'll see a weird little gap at the edges.
It'll be like a nice clean cut.
Yep.
Usually, like when you're making tricolores or making a full sheet of tricolores, you want to weigh it down to give a little more density to the cake. Especially the little ones. This is like I wanted there to be a little bit of volume. I wanted it to feel more like a cake because if it was too dense, it would be like, oh, this cake is really dense.
Yeah.
You know, so we're keeping it tight, but we're not really putting anything on it.
But
to kind of weigh
tricolor,
it down.
that's so interesting. But when you make the cookies, you actually
Press it down.
Love.
Yeah.
Now we're going to line a baking sheet with parchment. We're going to set a wire rack on top, which I assume is sort of to catch the glaze that's going to come after we pour the glaze on top of the cake. Remove the cake from the fridge and from the pan, unwrap it, place it on a cutting board. If the edges are at all angled or uneven, we're going to use a serrated knife to cut straight down on all sides.
Yep.
That's so natto to me. To like it has to be very precise, which I
Yes.
love. We're going to remove any excess crumbs because those will be yucky when we glaze it, and transfer the Spumoni cake to the prepared wire rack. And now we're flipping it so the pistachio is the top layer. We're going to return it to the refrigerator while we make the glaze. Why? Just because cold.
Just to keep it cool.
Cold.
Yeah. I'm trying to like cross my T's and dot my I's.
Love it.
Yeah.
So we're going to make the glaze. We're going to place chopped dark chocolate in a heat-proof medium bowl, preferably with a pour spout, if you have it, which I don't, but maybe I need to get. Are those like with the spouts? Are they usually glass?
Yeah, I mean, you could technically just use a measuring
Like a
cup,
big measuring
like
cup.
a 4-cup.
Yep.
Yep.
Which I have. I love
Yep.
my 4-cup measuring cup. In a medium saucepan, we're going to bring heavy cream and corn syrup to a boil over medium heat, stirring frequently.
Yep.
Are we adding the corn syrup for shininess?
Yes, shininess and I guess pliability.
I was going to say, yeah.
You don't want it to crack. You know, you want to be able to slice into it and have it kind of like sink. Yeah.
If people are not into corn syrup, can they use like a Lyle's golden syrup?
Golden
or something
syrup
like that?
will work as well.
Can you even use like honey?
I mean, I've not used honey in this,
Right.
but I don't see why
Why?
not because it's the same consistency.
Right.
I do find that honey dries things out, so I don't know how it would work with the chocolate or if
Maybe
it
we'll
would
stay away-
separate.
We'll stay away from
But
honey.
the Lyle's would be a good substitute.
And you actually bring it to a boil so we see bubbles, not a simmer? Or is it like a simmering?
Yeah, it's like the bubbles around the edge.
Yep,
Like
yep.
when you start seeing that, then it's good to
Yep.
go.
Stirring frequently. Doesn't matter if we use a spatula or a spoon. We're going to remove that from the heat. We're going to stir in some vanilla and some salt. And then we're going to pour that cream mixture over the chopped chocolate and just stir until the chocolate's completely melted.
Yep, nice and shiny, nice and glossy,
Perfect.
super smooth.
Do you need to, sometimes people will say like, oh, pour the hot liquid over the chocolate and then let it sit before you stir. Is this kind of like foolproof, like just start mixing?
Yeah, I mean, you can let it sit in there so the chocolate just really breaks down and then stir. You may be saving yourself like a minute of work. Yeah.
And then we're going to set that aside to cool about 30 minutes until it's slightly thickened. Can it still be warm when we use it, or should it be room temp?
I would say between room temp and a little warm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. Now we remove the cake from the refrigerator, and working very quickly, we're going to first just quickly pour the glaze over each side of the cake.
Yep.
So we make sure our sides are covered, allowing the glaze to coat the layers, you know, all the way to the bottom of the cake completely.
Exactly, and this helps create that smooth finish. You're
Yeah.
basically crumb coating it in a way.
Yep.
And it gets rid of any imperfections.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then we're going to pour the rest of the glaze on top of the cake and then use an offset spatula, one of the tiny ones.
You can use a tiny or a large one. I find that it's easier to manipulate with a smaller one.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll use an offset spatula. We'll smooth the top, pushing any extra glaze towards the edges and allowing it to run down the sides.
Yep.
Then we'll smooth the sides of the cake until the entire cake is covered in a nice, even layer.
Yes.
We'll top the cake, I love this, with 3 small piles of chopped pistachios, like little nests, lying down the center, and top each of those nests with a cherry.
Yep.
And we're going to return it to the refrigerator to set for an hour. Is that decoration from Nato's head, or does it have some kind of symbolism?
It's from Nato's head, actually. I mean, when I was developing this recipe, I was working with ginger. I think we were just...
Not the spice.
Oh, yes. An actual person.
A person.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, it's a big brown log. We have to make this pretty, you know? So I think it was this combination of just like, well, of course, you want to know what's inside. Obviously, you have the chocolate already, pistachios and cherries.
Love it.
It's just like process of elimination. Yeah.
To serve, we'll use an offset spatula, or maybe even 2, to transfer the cake to a platter, allow it to sit at room temp for about 10 minutes, and then we'll slice.
Yes.
I just wanted to mention a couple of other recipes from the book that I love. Tell us a little bit about the Aperol Spritz cake.
Yes. So I'm not much of a drinker, but I do like a nice Aperol Spritz, and I love the culture of aperitivo in Italy, where it's just like everyone's drinking a Spritz, they're eating their food. It's just such a fun, nice concept to me, and one that I'm trying to bring over to the new restaurant. When we were creating our cake menu for Ciao, I wanted all the cakes, you know, like how Baked had, like, they were candy leaning. You know, you had the malt ball, the lemon head, the red hot. I wanted these to kind of lean Italian. So we have a pistachio cake, a lemon cake, a hazelnut cake, but I was like, we need an Aperol Spritz cake. Coming up with that cake and coming up with like how the flavors of a Spritz are represented. Because if you know, Aperol is a bitter, doesn't really translate very well into a cake. But we used a little bit of Aperol in an orange curd, and then we used the Prosecco and the buttercream, and then we did it like a citrus layer cake. So you have all the components there for an Aperol Spritz cake, but it's cake.
Tell us about the malted tiramisu.
Yes. Well, malted is something that I've just acquired a taste for over the years.
It was such a baked ingredient.
It was such a big thing. I mean, malt went into everything. And I think that was mostly Matt, because I think he just had an obsession with it. But it is a great flavor profile. It has this nice nuttiness, this earthiness, not even earthiness, but depth. The tiramisu, I wanted a classic tiramisu in the book, but I wanted to add that twist to it. And I found that during one of the tests, adding malt to the espresso mixture and then adding malt to the mascarpone, zabaione mixture, gave the tiramisu a real depth of flavor. And I never knew that coffee and malt worked well together. I always thought malt and chocolate, and there is chocolate in this, but the way it pairs with the coffee, it just gives it this robust, delicious sweetness that is suddenly present throughout the entire dessert. Originally, I had even made Savoiardi, the ladyfingers, with malt in them as well. But because we were using that recipe as a foundation recipe in like different recipes out the book, I was just like, well, I'll just take the malt out of there, but add it to the other components.
So good. And finally, I love this, honey ricotta black and whites.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I'm a huge black and white fan. I've always loved them, and I've always been on a mission to find the perfect one. And I did find the perfect one, and the bakery Glazers, which was on the Upper East Side, after 100+ years had closed down. And basically what theirs was almost like cupcake quality cake or cookie with frosting and just like slathered on. And I was just like, this is delicious. This is like exactly what I want a black and white to be. So in homage to that, that's why our frosting, that's why we have more of a frosting on our black and white cookies, like a spreadable type of glaze on it. And the cookie itself was a cookie we originally made for Ciao, a honey lemon ricotta cookie, but it didn't really sell very well. It wasn't very pretty. You know, it was just like a domed yellow cookie with a little glaze on top. And I loved the taste of it. And I was like, what can we do to this to kind of gussy it up? So I flipped it over and I was like, this looks like a black and white. It's almost the same. So I said, let's ice these as black and whites and see what happens. And now it's my favorite black and white.
Oh my gosh. Love that story.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for chatting with me today, Nato. And I just want to say that you are my cherry pie.
Oh, what an honor.
That's it for today's show. Don't forget to follow She's My Cherry Pie on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. And tell your pals about us. You can find today's recipe at cherrybomb.com. She's My Cherry Pie is a production of the Cherry Bomb Podcast Network. Thank you to CityVox Studio in Manhattan. Our producers are Carrie Diamond, Catherine Baker, and Jenna Sadu. Thank you so much for listening to She's My Cherry Pie, and happy baking!